Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, great. So I'm Amna Siddiqui. I manage student engagement for computer science at the New York City Department of Education. I'm really happy to be here today to talk to you about one of my most favorite events, the CEP Arcade Hackathon. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a hackathon is, our definition at least is an all-day event where students come together to create. CEP Arcade was held at the Downtown Community Television Center on May 30th of last year. It was a 7-hour event from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. We ended up with 9 schools and a grand total of 72 students. We also had around 15 teachers who accompanied their students to the event and approximately 10 volunteers from local universities. Just some quick background. CEP stands for the Software Engineering Program. This is a DOE program umbrellaed under the Computer Science for All initiative. CEP is an elective currently offered in 18 schools across all 5 boroughs. We have 9 middle schools and 9 high schools. Students enrolled in CEP have opportunities to learn a range of computer science and software engineering topics, from robotics to web design to electronics. We also have a robust after-school scene. Around 3 years ago, CEP received a generous grant from the AT&T Foundation to design and implement extracurricular programming for our students, like internship opportunities, science fair-style showcases, and of course, hackathons. So this is how the CEP Hackathon came to be. We offer our schools 2 types of hackathons every semester, a centrally located hackathon and a school-based hackathon. We started out with the central model, where schools meet and hack in one central location, for example, at Microsoft in Times Square. The issue with this type of event is that you can only invite so many students. For us, that cap is usually around 150 participants. So we weren't able to give all of our students the same opportunities, which is why we came up with the school-based hackathon idea. So it's just one big hackathon happening across multiple schools for 1 week. For every school-based hackathon, we create and package a digital kit for our schools, and we call it the CEP Hack Pack. This hack pack contains a slideshow, student worksheets, a teacher guide, materials checklist, and a scoring rubric. Shared on Google Drive, teachers can download all of the materials and run the hackathon independently at their schools. These school-based events have served nearly 900 students in just 1 week, compared to 150 students at our central hackathons. So this is tremendous, and our teachers and schools feel empowered running these events at their schools. Our hackathon goals are pretty straightforward: building community across all 18 of our schools and providing students context for their schoolwork. Every CEP hackathon follows a recipe of 4 basic parts: people, space, technology, and competition. We also organize the day so it mimics the design cycle. This has turned out to be a fantastic structure that keeps our students engaged from start to finish. So here's a list of all of the CEP hackathons we've done to date. I've indicated which ones were central and which ones were school-based. You can see that CEP Arcade falls mostly in the middle, and it's the second central hackathon we ever did. So now that there's some context in place, let's turn to some of the challenges we were facing leading up to the CEP Arcade. In general, I think the themes we were struggling with were engagement and a sense of authenticity. How can we create immersive, memorable environments where students can complete deep dives in computer science? In other words, how could we make computer science learning fun? And how could we encourage students to use the design process? And furthermore, how could we create a sense of community across our 18 schools with these hackathons? And then the CEP Arcade happened. We did a bunch of things right that led us to connecting with our students, principals, and teachers in a very lasting and positive way. After the CEP Arcade, all 3 of these challenges I mentioned very quickly dissipated. So what did we do right? Let's go back to the very beginning of the CEP Arcade, where our hackathon participants learned their challenge was to design a game. Very simple and intentionally open-ended. Because we're serving the needs and attention spans of 2 grade bands, that is middle school and high school, Our hackathon challenges always need to be quite broad. We also ask students to register in advance of the event and to choose their preferred programming language. We gave our students 4 coding options, all which are taught in the CEP curriculum. So students could choose from the following: the block-based educational programming language, Scratch, Python, GameStar Mechanic, and Processing. Scratch, which is the easiest of the 4, ended up being the most popular language at the hackathon. As students arrived to DCTV the morning of the CEP Arcade, they were loosely divided into 4 sections based on the language they'd chosen for themselves. Shown on the screen are the 4 coding sections at DCTV. Once students were settled, we kicked off the day by reviewing a handful of game design principles, empowering our young software engineers to now also begin thinking like game designers. After this morning lesson, students were asked to form and work in teams of 3 or 4 for the rest of the day. The team names were quite creative, my personal favorites being Bagel Squad, Makers of Adventure, Master Hackers, The Bobs, and Krusty Peaches. We then moved on to brainstorming and paper prototyping. We asked students to brainstorm 3 ideas, pick the best one, and then flesh it out on paper, all before turning to a computer. We found that students see value in sketching out their ideas. They create things like webs, storyboards, character illustrations, and decision trees. Once prototyping was over, we then turned to the main event, the reason why all 72 students had registered to begin with, coding time. For about an hour and a half, students developed digital translations of their paper models, making edits and adjustments all under the supervision and guidance of their CEP teachers. Having our CEP teachers present was huge, not because they were managing the students. We could have gotten a group of volunteers to do that very easily, but it's because they understood their students. CEP teachers were the ones in the room who best knew their students' work, abilities, and capabilities, and they helped bring out the best in their students' projects. After coding session 1, we asked teams to partner up so they could share positive thought and feature requests with one another. Feedback, only 10 minutes per team, is a very quick but important step, as students have an opportunity to use that feedback to improve and strengthen their projects during the final coding session. There is not much time for students to refine their ideas, but at CEP Hackathons, this is totally fine and normal as we emphasize process over final product. Toward the end of the day, students prepared a 3-minute pitch to present at the front of the room. 19 teams presented to our panel of judges, all professional game designers, who selected 5 winning teams. Categories included best iteration process, most entertaining, most complex, and most educational. The day ended with the awards ceremony, where the winning teams won an assortment of educational board games for their schools. So then, now that I've covered how the day went down, let's go back to the 3 challenge areas I mentioned earlier. How did we tackle them? And what made the CEP Arcade so special? I've identified 4 takeaways. 1, we gave students the opportunity to self-select their language expertise. They came to the CEP Arcade Hackathon both excited and interested in the language they'd be programming in all day. There was no coding barrier or letdown. 2, we had major teacher buy-in at this event. Most of the teachers who attended the CEP Hackathon helped us plan it. The day was truly a joint effort and a joint vision. 3, like I mentioned earlier, CEP teachers accompanied their students to the CEP Arcade. Students had a familiar and dedicated support for the entire event. And finally, we successfully embedded the design cycle into the hackathon schedule. And what I mean by that is we struck the right balance of analog and digital. Students had fun both on paper and on their computers as they internalized an important process directly tied to their schoolwork, meaning the design process. I think the CEP Arcade was a major turning point for our community events. To be perfectly honest, before CEP Arcade, our events were somewhat underwhelming. I suppose it's also because we were still working out the kinks. But I think it's interesting and an important part of our process to note that since the SEP Arcade, there's been nonstop excitement from our students and teachers when it comes to SEP events, especially for our SEP hackathons. They see themselves as part of a unique, diverse, and important community. After the hackathon, we sent out a survey to students asking for their feedback, and it was very positive overall. They were challenged, there was some healthy competition going on, as a student here points out he had fun finding glitches in other teams' alpha versions, and students also saw the hackathon as a community available to them. There were a couple of high school students who asked for a longer hackathon and for a more specific challenge versus the very broad one we gave at the SEP Arcade. One thing we did just a few Saturdays ago was we hosted a CS for All high school hackathon at Cornell Tech. It was open to high school students only, and because the participants were older, we were able to make the requirements a bit more serious and specific. I think more focused technical hackathons are definitely something we'll be doing more of in the future. So that's the SEP Arcade. If you are interested in running this hackathon with youth or colleagues even, or if you're curious and want to check it out, I've made the Arcade Hack Pack available on Google Drive. The URL is bit.ly/arcade hackpack, all lowercase. The Hack Pack contains all of the contents I mentioned earlier, so a day of slideshow, student worksheets, a teacher guide, materials, checklist, and finally a scoring rubric. This summer, we're aiming to make all of our hackathons, central and school-based, available for free to anyone. So please keep your eyes peeled for that. Thank you.